A train ride through majestic mountains. A journey back in time. A tour of alien landscapes. A visit with ancient cultures. An itinerary such as this might sound like a dream, but the American Museum of Natural History has made this dream a reality. And for the travelers aboard the American Orient Express, this reality is a tour of the national parks of the West by train. This is the second of a two-part journey. In part one, we toured Rocky Mountain National Park, crossed the Rockies en route to Salt Lake City from Denver, stopped at Golden Spike National Historic Site, where the last spike of the Pacific Railroad was driven. We paid a visit to the hoodoos of Bryce Canyon National Park. Marveled at the beauty of Zion National Park. And took a tour of the ruins of Wupatki National Monument. In part two of our journey, we'll ride the American Orient Express to northwestern Arizona to see the world-renowned Grand Canyon. And enjoy a Native American dance presentation at the Coconino Center for the Arts. Then we'll travel to New Mexico, where we'll tour Acoma Pueblo, the Sky City, where Native Americans still live atop a towering mesa. Visit El Morro National Monument, where early explorers left their mark in the sandstone. We'll walk the streets of Santa Fe, New Mexico, the oldest city in the Southwest. And finally, explore the ancient Puya cliff dwellings. As we begin this part of our tour, we're in Williams, Arizona, where we've spent the night. The beautiful Williams Train Depot, built in 1908, is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. It's early morning, and we're just getting underway. Our destination? Grand Canyon. For hungry travelers, the first order of business in the morning is breakfast. And this morning, the galley staff on the American Orient Express is busy preparing a gourmet meal featuring a variety of fruit. If you respect the talents of gourmet chefs in a stationary kitchen, just consider the special skills required of chefs on board a moving train. The rail line used by the American Orient Express for its trek from Williams to the Grand Canyon is the historic Grand Canyon Railway. The train, which usually runs on these tracks, is a vintage model, restored for use on this short run. Getting a first-hand look at the two-man operation in the cab takes us back to a time when rail travel was at its peak. The years following 1850 saw an enormous growth in rail lines, especially in the eastern United States. What had been a scattering of short lines from Maine to Georgia grew into a rail network serving all the eastern states. The period between the Civil War and World War I was a golden age for American railroads, and the decades which followed saw increasing rail travel and the use of rail lines for interstate commerce. For men like these, who feel the train's moods and operate it as much by its rhythms as by its gauges, it was a glorious time. But everything must change. Railroads in America, although still an important means of freight shipment, declined as a popular form of transportation, taking a backseat to buses, airlines, and the private car. But rail travel, while it may be less popular, has never been more exciting. Our journey to the Grand Canyon uses the same track as the steamer, but we're aboard the American Orient Express. Upon our arrival at Grand Canyon Station, we see ample evidence that we are indeed getting back to nature.
I have 4 cars to stop. There's a whole herd of deer off to your right there.
One of the most awe-inspiring places on the face of the earth is the Grand Canyon, a 277-mile-long gouge in the planet's crust. Up to 18 miles wide and over a mile deep in places, it dwarfs its nearest rivals. From the ground, the enormity of this place is incomprehensible. In keeping with its size, the Grand Canyon offers its visitors a huge feast for the eyes. This magnificent place has inspired many to say eloquent things about it. It has been called a land to humble the soul. It has been called the temple of the world because of the reverence it instills when seeing it for the first time. John Muir, the 19th century naturalist, put it this way: "It will seem as novel to you, as unearthly in the color and grandeur and quantity of its architecture, as if you had found it after death on some other star." Not unlike Bryce and Zion Canyons, the Grand Canyon is the result of millions of years of geologic activity, only on a much larger scale. The rapid speed and massive volume of the Colorado River has caused vigorous erosion over the last 6 million years. The Grand Canyon's north rim is 1,200 feet higher than its south rim, making the terrain on one side radically different from the other. The north rim, part of the Kaibab Plateau, borders on dense forest. The south rim, which is on the Coconino Plateau, borders on essentially flat land. The first European to sight the Grand Canyon is thought to have been a member of Coronado's exploration party, which came upon it in 1540. Since then, many adventurers have explored the canyon, and millions of people have vacationed here. Through it all, one thing has remained clear. Whether you are an explorer or a sightseer, the Grand Canyon mesmerizes its visitors. The canyon is forested by ponderosa pine, pinyon pine, and Utah juniper. 75 different species of mammals live here, along with 300 species of birds. It's no wonder that the Grand Canyon plays host annually to more than 4 million visitors. Our trip back to Williams will be aboard the American Orient Express. The Amtrak engines which pull the American Orient Express are actually powered by electricity. An onboard diesel engine is used to generate the electricity that powers the drive motors. The combination is called diesel-electric. This design makes the controls of the engine relatively simple, especially compared with the maze of levers and gauges on the steamer.
Amtrak 505 GCR dispatcher, over.
Our engineer for this leg of our journey is Irvin White.
1145 AM, over.
Amtrak 505 is out of the Grand Canyon yard limits at 1145, 1145 AM, over.
Yeah, I'm looking at my brake gauges, my speedometer, my amp meter for dynamic braking, and balancing it all out so I maintain the right thresholds. That means I'm trying not to exceed the speed limits. The engineer training generally consists of some book knowledge. You need to understand the principles and operations of locomotives. And here at Grand Canyon Railway, we operate both steam and diesel. So we generally start out and train somebody for a diesel engine because it's easier and quicker to do than it is for engineers on steam. So what's running the train like? It's like controlling a rubber band. This train's about a quarter mile long, it's a short one. Freight trains can go 1.5 miles, 2 miles sometimes. It's not always easy. It's not always fun. It can be enjoyable. You have to deal with livestock, people that cross in school buses, gas trucks, complying with all the rules and regulations. There always seems to be something different almost every day, whether it's the weather, or operating conditions, or different crew members. I wouldn't give it up for anything else in the world.
It's obvious that these men love their work, and railroading is in their blood.
I've been railroading for 32 years, going on 33 this December. My father was with the Moffett Railroad, and he was, I'm not quite certain what year that he started. It was back in at least the early 20s because he was working with him when the Moffett Tunnel was built, and that started in 1924. And he was actually, in my family, he was the first one that started railroading. But when you consider that he was born in 1891, and he started railroading at a very young man, I think he said that he got by at 16 years of age. And they didn't question him on it too much, and that started his career. But all the while that he was railroading, he'd always bring home stories and different individuals. telling us what happened along the way. At that time, it was very interesting, what have you, but I had no idea of the stories that he was telling at that time, how golden they were right now.
Many years ago, our family always took a lot of railroad trips, and the entire family got in on it. My dad was the second president of the SP Old Timers, and he was always associated with railroads. We started out many years ago when I was 5 years old. Dad was a roadmaster, and I made my first engine. My first engine was made out of an orange crate, mounted on a couple of two-by-fours with 4 buggy wheels and a piece of rope to make it so that I could steer it, and an old boiler like they used in a lard pails system. And I put a tomato can on for the chimney and a bean can on for the headlight, and Crayola, SP on one side and Union Pacific on the other side, and that was my childhood interest in model railroading.
I have a long history of interest in trains. My father was a barber on the 20th Century Limited and other trains, and I used to hear stories from him about some of his adventures. I have lots of photographs of him when he was working on the railroad.
Our whole family were more or less 100% railroaders. That's all I can say.
When parking a quarter-mile long train, you have to know not only where the engine is, but also where the last car is. The station dispatcher radios the train's position car by car.
Engine 505, about 4 cars.
Oh.
Three cars.
3,
2 more.
2.
Keep pulling 505. The rear of the train's about over the crossing now.
Right.
One more good car.
One more.
You are clear of the signal, Irvin.
And that's how it's done. Good afternoon.
Life for Native Americans in the picturesque Southwest is a mixture of pride and hardship. Many exist on earnings from the sales of their handcrafted art which reflects their religion and age-old ceremonies.
So that's the fifth. King Charles. His name is Dorothy Sanchez. Yes, some of them are handmade. These here, no. Oh, then you probably mean over here.
Some keep their traditions alive by performing Native American dances. Here at the Coconino Center for the Arts, near Flagstaff, Arizona, we're treated to a beautiful performance of intertribal dances by the Jones Benally family dancers.
The first performance, the first one called the Intertribal, the War Dance, that is a social dance. It's a powwow dance. It's intertribal. All tribes come together and perform this dance in celebration or in competition. Sometimes we have people come from South America or sometimes from Africa and perform, well, not really perform, but dance with us. We dance in a large circle. But it's mainly tribes from all over North America. Shield dance is a dance that was taught to the young men of our tribe so that way they would have skills in hunting and in war. Where the dance originated from were the two twins, the monster slayers, who are a big part of our Diné history. When my brothers are dancing and doing this dance, it's showing the twins. One represents the day and one represents the night. The outfit that I'm wearing is the fancy shawl outfit. It's with the Navajo design. This design on my skirt comes from the Navajo wedding basket. The eagles on my outfit are representations of my clan. My clan is the Totochini, which is the Bitterwater, but we came from the Eagle people. And so I wear the eagles as a reminder. The eagle dance that my brother does is, wait, this is a long story. The most wonderful thing about our culture is that the stories are really long. The eagle dance, in short, comes from the bead ceremony that's performed by our people, the Navajo people. The Diné. That's our name for ourselves, the people. Navajo was given to us by the Spaniards, and it's actually a derogatory term which means thieves. We prefer to use Diné. Most dances that are done for ceremony, for healing, but what we showed today was it's a portion that's allowed to be seen by the public. It's not the actual ceremony because we can't do that. We only do that for private use. That's because it's religious, it's spiritual to us, and it's not like we want to go out advertising. It's not like you go and if you're a medicine person, you go and advertise in your local paper. You don't do that. It's something that is meant for the patient and not meant for anybody else. as all people of the world, I think that we should all really learn to respect each other and learn to respect ourselves, learn to respect the environment. If we can't respect ourselves, we can't respect anything else around us. We can't respect other people. I think that's what we need as people. We all need to learn how to respect each other.
Day number 7 of our journey ends as we return to the Williams, Arizona train station to reboard the American Orient Express.
Are you hungry? Yeah, I'm hungry.
The aroma of sautéed greens and peppers greets these late evening travelers. Leaving the Grand Canyon area, we have to wonder if anything else on our journey through the Great Southwest will be as spectacular. Spectacular in their own fashion are the sights that remain to be discovered. More adventures lie ahead as we travel a rail line made popular by a song of the 1940s, the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe. The Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railway is regarded by many as the epitome of luxurious rail travel in America. Its passenger service is legendary. From the famed 1911 Santa Fe Deluxe to the more recent Super Chief, the preferred vehicle of Hollywood movie stars, the Santa Fe gave its passengers the absolute best in comfort, luxury, and gourmet meals. The Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railway Company eventually came to be known as the railway that built an empire which included all of the Southwest, from the Mississippi to the Pacific, and from the Rockies to the Gulf of Mexico. Imagine an area comparable in size to France, taking in the land centered at the Four Corners region, where the states of Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico, and Utah adjoin. This was the home of the Anasazi. The ruins of their villages are widespread throughout this region. Anasazi, or ancient enemies, is accurate enough. The Anasazi are indeed ancient, dating back to the time of Christ. They are modern-day descendants of the Hopi, Zuni, Rio Grande Pueblo peoples, and the Acoma. Crossing the New Mexico desert, we visit the people of Acoma. They call it Sky City. It's the oldest continuously occupied city in North America, founded about 1100 AD. The village was built atop a sandstone mesa that rises 357 feet above the valley floor. From this vantage point, the Acoma people were able to defend themselves against intruders.
Our mesa here was occupied back in 1150 AD. In our Acoma language, we call our mesa here Aku. That mesa there we call Katsima.
For centuries, these structures made of flat stones plastered with adobe and supported with wooden beams have been home to these people.
Our homes have to be replastered at least twice to 3 times a year. Also, the water is used to sprinkle down the dirt floors, which some of our homes still have.
The Acoma people till the soil. Their irrigated fields below the mesa and extending almost 12 miles to the north are planted with maize, beans, and squash. In ovens introduced by the Spanish, they bake their own bread.
When all the bread is finished being baked, we take it out and then we can also roast our meats, our corns, and also if they made pies and cookies, we can also bake them in here.
Their pottery is beautiful and holds a strong attraction for visiting tourists. It's offered for sale to the public as well as being used in Acoma ceremonies. The predominant religion here is their own Indian faith with a mixture of Catholicism. In 1629, the missionary Father Juan Ramirez began construction of this church dedicated to Saint Stephen, who later became the patron saint of the Acoma. The bell in St. Stephen's Church was presented to the Acoma people as a gift from King Charles II of Spain. Our visit concludes with a final look at the beautiful New Mexico desert from the vantage point of Sky City. The prehistoric ancestors of the Acoma inhabited these lands as long ago as 5,000 years before Christ. They lived in simple rock shelters or shallow caves. Supplies of food were stored in pits dug in the dry floors of caves. In more recent history, around 1100 AD, those who followed the Anasazi made their homes in box canyons with vertical sides. Accessible only by ladders, these cliff dwellings made it easy for the Anasazi to defend themselves against unwanted visitors. Looking even further back in New Mexico's past, we discover a different kind of environment from what we know today. Dormant volcanoes dot the New Mexico landscape. The southwestern state we now call Land of Enchantment was once Land of Volcanoes.
Now you notice that a lot of the railroad ballast here is actually lava, basalt, and it's full of gas holes. And it's very typically used for railroad ballast because the rock is so tough. Now I'm going to try to break it with this hammer. Notice how hard, how tough this is. I can't. I finally broke it. So it's not typical of it, but it did the job that we needed. And you can see the fresh surface of the lava. See all of the gas holes that are in it. And in fact, some of the holes are actually filled with little minerals. And you can see those white spots in the lava.
At our next stop, we find more evidence that the Anasazi, ancestors of the Pueblo, Zuni, and Hopi tribes, were indeed an ancient people. A centuries-old rest haven is found here at El Morro National Monument in western New Mexico. On the soft sandstone walls, we find petroglyphs carved by the Anasazi. The meanings of these inscriptions are not totally clear, but most scholars agree these drawings were meant to bring good fortune or success in the hunt. This is the reason travelers stopped here over the years, a 12-foot deep pool containing 200,000 gallons of potable water. There's no well here. This is simply a reservoir which gathers the water from summer rains and the melted snow of spring. Centuries after the Anasazi, this watering hole continued to attract visitors, many of whom left their mark in the sandstone.
Here's a nice old one. Miguel Alfaro, paso por aquí. Can you translate that for me? Passed by here. Miguel Alfaro. That's right, Kilroy was here. That's basically the same thing. This one's not dated. There's a lot of these that aren't dated, and it's really too bad because it'd be fun if we could really research these more carefully. Probably 1700s though, but who knows? P. Gilmer Breckenridge was a surveyor out here with the military, 1859, dead a couple years later in Virginia during the Civil War.
These solid walls of ancient rock appear to have stood defiantly against all that time and nature could mount against them. But on occasion, the slow pressure of Earth's forces shears off a wall section, sending it crashing in one deafening instant against the ground.
Well, it actually happened at Chaco Canyon in, I think, 1949, one winter day. And then there were some people there, out there, camping and hanging out at the, whatever they had there in the 49, I don't think it was a visitor center, but... And all of a sudden, this big thing just fell right over about 7 o'clock in the morning and crushed about a third of Pueblo Bonito. And you still have to climb over the wreckage to get into the Pueblo on the trail. And it's extraordinary, but they were actually there and people, wow, it really happened. I mean, this is something that happens all the time in geological time, but we're like little gnats with like 30-second lifespans compared to the rest of the world. So it's kind of neat when it happens in our 30 seconds.
The translation of this inscription is, on the 25th of the month of June of this year of 1709, passed by here on the way to Zuni, Ramon Garcia Jurado. This is the most elegantly carved inscription, the signature of E. Penn Long of Baltimore. He was a member of a Lieutenant Edward F. Beale's 1857 caravan that was testing the usefulness of camels in crossing the deserts of the American Southwest. Railroaders from the Union Pacific Railroad also visited El Morro, scouting the area for a possible rail line. The project was never carried out, but the Santa Fe Railroad did lay track 25 miles to the north, effectively ending El Morro's history as a desert stopping place. Day number 8 of our journey concludes back in Grants, New Mexico, as we set off towards Santa Fe by way of Albuquerque. Some of our stops are purely for maintenance purposes. This is the reason for this brief layover. The iron horse needs feeding. Hitched to invisible posts, it stands and tolerates its groomers. In a stable of iron and concrete, it rests and regains its strength. Given food, it waits. as the light changes and the music ranges from mood to mood. This horse lives to run, but for now it stands and waits and tolerates its groomers. While all this activity takes place, life inside the train continues in luxury and comfort. The following morning finds us traveling north through New Mexico, approaching Santa Fe. These rail lines were once wagon trails, where intrepid wagoners, or bullwhackers, drove oxen and horses, pulling their Conestoga wagons, filled with goods to be sold, along the old Santa Fe Trail. Old Santa Fe, New Mexico has a feeling about it, a feeling of age, a feeling of history, a feeling of America's roots. This is where the old Santa Fe Trail played a big part in building trade routes between the American Midwest and Mexico in the 19th century. The trail linked Franklin and later Independence, Missouri, with Santa Fe, New Mexico, and eventually Chihuahua City, Mexico. Commerce over the Santa Fe Trail boomed when New Mexico was ceded as part of the United States in 1848, following the Mexican War. The trail was eclipsed in 1880 by a more modern trade route, the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad. Santa Fe today is a blend of Indian, Spanish, and American cultures. Its warm, dry climate makes it an ideal tourist destination any month of the year. Its primary magnetism is its history, Southwest architecture, antiques, and its arts and crafts. Sitting by a fountain, dreaming, listening to the sound of water, we trace back to yesterday, remembering days when streams and ponds and sounds were pure, when life was simple and full of meaning. Local Indian craftsmen use the Palace of the Governor's Portal as a showplace for their beautiful handcrafted goods. The Palace of the Governors was once a stopping place along the Santa Fe Trail for the Conestoga wagoners looking for markets for their wares.
The Santa Fe Plaza is one of the real landmarks in the United States. It's been a plaza since about 1610, 1608. It was always, and it still is, the sort of living, beating heart of Santa Fe. So when you come to Santa Fe, we always take you to the plaza. And then there are other things around the plaza. There's St. Francis Cathedral, which is a cathedral that was rebuilt by Bishop Lamy. Originally there was an adobe church. Everything was adobe, that is, of mud brick. And Bishop Lamy felt that he was French and that a French cathedral would be much nicer than a mud church, and so he built the cathedral, St. Francis Cathedral. It's not finished. You'll notice the towers are kind of cut off, and that's because when he died, work stopped on the cathedral.
The doors of the cathedral contain exquisite carvings which trace Santa Fe's early history. The
other things that people might want to see in Santa Fe is, of course, they could see the little Santa Fe River, which doesn't have much water in it, but it's very important to us because it is the water. The Palace of the Governors is on one side of the Santa Fe Plaza, and in all Spanish towns there's always a civil building, the City Hall is really what it is, on one side of every town square. That's the pattern that was established when the Spanish came to the New World. It was the way they felt a plaza should be organized, and so they are, and that is the oldest public building in continuous use in the United States. The Indians who sit under the portal, which is the little porch on the Palace of the Governors, are in some ways a part of an exhibit by the museum. The city has always had that market activity in the square, and these Indians now are like a living display, and the silver and the turquoise they sell is monitored. They monitor each other. It's also monitored by the museum so that it's a market where you can be assured that what you're buying is really what they say it is.
There's an interesting story surrounding the inscription on the obelisk in the town plaza.
The dedication on this side has some interesting history. It says, "To the heroes who have fallen in the various battles with," and there's a word hacked out, "Indians of the territory of New Mexico." And about 10 years ago, I guess, that space after with and before Indians still had a word in it. It was savage. And there was a great debate that went on in Santa Fe about how to rectify the problem of savage being in the dedication. And some people wanted to remove the monument, other people were fighting to save the monument. And finally, one day, someone just stepped over the rail with a stone chisel and chiseled out savage, and that solved the problem.
Santa Fe's history is closely tied to the Catholic Church. In addition to historic St. Francis Cathedral, Santa Fe boasts the oldest church in continuous use in North America. This is San Miguel Chapel, built in 1610, about the time Shakespeare was writing Hamlet and Galileo was assembling the first telescope. Inside these walls, nearly 400 years of prayers have been heard. The tour of downtown Santa Fe occupies half our day. The balance will be spent exploring the ancient cliff dwellings just north of Santa Fe. Prehistoric cliff dwellings are found in a large area of the American Southwest. These are one of the more famous, the Puye cliff dwellings. These ancient cliffs were abandoned by their inhabitants about 600 years ago. Our guide is Peter Weiss.
These natural cavates, these little Swiss cheese holes here, were easily enlarged by harder tools. The most common tool, and the best tool you could possibly hope to have, of course, being obsidian, a volcanic glass. It's not a stone or rock, it's a glass that's formed of fused silica. Happens in volcanoes quite often. Now bear in mind that this is the floor level up here about my shoulders. You can see this mud plastering that's on the wall. This is not reproduced. This is the remnants of a consistent mud plastering that occurred all the way around here in order to create a smooth surface to lean against. Up above us in the Jemez, there's a cliff face about 300 feet up and about over 100 yards long of just solid obsidian, particular cavate. The Indians who are living here are the direct ancestors of the modern-day pueblos of the northern Rio Grande Valley, the Rio Arriba. They're all down below here. At this particular site, we're seeing the ancestral home of the Santa Clara Pueblo. As you'll notice, of course, is that it's built of stone and not of adobe. Adobe bricks are a Spanish innovation, something the Spanish brought from Europe and Africa. And the Indians use stone. They laid flagstone.
But basically, it's pretty simple.
Oh, it's beautiful stuff. And what's really amazing is that, I mean, there's 13 of these things out there. Pueblo Bonito, the largest one, contains over 1.5 million cubic feet of really long way. Huge energy effort went into constructing this place. What's there?
Is this what you do barefoot?
Yeah. Here, come up, then go down.
At the top of the cliffs are additional ruins which display a different architectural style.
Some of these rooms were occupied when others were empty, and we don't know when things were re-inhabited or not inhabited, but it's possible that 500, 1,000, there's no way of knowing exactly how many people are up here. We don't know if the people living on the cliffs were living there when people were living up here, so movement back and forth, it's pretty hard to determine populations. And of course this has all been reconstructed of what this entire stretch around here would have looked like. 2 and 3 stories high, short stories, maybe 5, 6 feet each. Openings from the roof to enter, you climb up a ladder to get on the roof and go down inside. You still see the same architecture at Taos Pueblo. You still see it to a large extent at Acoma. This is a place where they could raise beans and corn and squash, which are their primary crops, bear and deer, elk, rabbit, and this is also what they subsisted on. It's a pretty lean diet, and they were actually pretty healthy people. They didn't have great life expectancies, but in those days nobody did. In some ways you can argue that their health was actually in many ways better than their European contemporaries.
Our visit to the Puye cliff dwellings ends as we come away with a greater knowledge and appreciation of the lifestyle of these extinct Native Americans. All good things have an end, but this group that has gone from strangers to friends during the past 9 days is going to end it on a high note.
It's a great experience to have a trip for the American Museum of Natural History. I've done a lot of tours for them in different parts of the country, and this one I think is new for them. It's new for us, but it's a very exciting way to get to see the national parks. People seem to have enjoyed it a great deal. Being able to relax on the train and take it rather close to the beautiful parks of our country, I think is a good way to travel.
1,500 miles later, we finally know a rock from the
Our tour of the national parks of the West aboard the American Orient Express is about to become a memory that will surely relive in our thoughts for years to come.